Hymn number 54.
That's all we go.
120. There will be a happy meeting in heaven, I know. When we see the blessed loved ones we've known here below, gathered on the blessed hilltops with hearts all aglow. That will be a glad reunion day. Glad day's a wonderful day. Glad day, a glorious day. There with all the holy angels and loved ones to stay. That will be a glad reunion day. There within the holy city we'll sing and rejoice, praising Christ the blessed Savior with heart and with voice. Tell Him how we came to love Him and make Him our choice. That will be a glad reunion day. Glad day, a wonderful day. Glad day, a glorious day. There with all the holy angels and loved ones to say. That will be a glad reunion day. When we live a million years in that wonderful place, basking in the love of Jesus, beholding His face, it will seem but just a moment of praising His grace. That will be a glad reunion day. Glad day, a wonderful day. Glad day, a glorious day. There with all the holy angels and loved ones to stay. That will be a glad reunion day.
And you just never know when that's going to be. I know we always talk about it. I don't know if there's a preacher out there that at some point, during a week mentions the fact that you just never know when he's going to come again. And in Sunday school, we just wrapped up. We've been going through the book of Revelation. We just finished the last chapter today. And so in doing so, of course, John said that very same thing. We got talking about this. In 200 years ago, no electricity, no running water, no indoor plumbing, no airplanes, no highways, no paved roads, no cars. I mean, there was, 200 years ago, everybody lived pretty much the same since the beginning of time without much. I mean, there was some, but everybody had to go in an outhouse. Everybody had to walk. Everybody had to ride. And that was a general way of life for 6,000 years. Then all of a sudden, 200 years ago, something happened, right? And we've gone from, horses to airplanes and going to the moon. It just lets you know somebody hit the gas, right? And you can't just put that away. It happened, right? And so I don't know how much time we have, but it is nice to know that it is coming. It's a reality, and we're going to be there one day. And but after going through a message about obedience, I told a couple people afterwards, it's just like, but I sure would like tomorrow to try and do that a little better. If I can get another day under my belt and having to do things right instead of wrong, that'd be a good day. It gives us another chance to work on it. So although I'd be happy if he came, I'll take tomorrow and use it for him best of my ability. Amen. So still haven't heard any more back about Africa. Just pray for that roof situation there, that we're going to have a guy come out tomorrow and work on doing that. I don't know if we have any other prayer requests or any other announcements. Don't forget the senior thing. And Al and Kathy's wife told me that she'd come as long as we had played cornhole or something like that. She didn't want to feel like she was hanging out with a bunch of old people. So I told her, I said, Kathy, you're in that department, right? She reminded me that she doesn't feel that, but it'll be a good time. The whole idea about it is Maggie and I just want to be able to spend some time with you, and because I live out a little bit further, this is a just great way that we can all do it together, and I'm excited about it. We do have some fun things planned. And if you like fish, there'll be fried fish. Wendell's going to help with that, and we'll have some chicken to go along with that. Most importantly, a good time of fellowship, and I'm thankful that we get to do that. I'm looking forward to it. So, all right, Brother Ronnie.
All right, if everybody please stand and turn your hymn book to number 120, and the Brother Deacons come forth to receive the offering, please. Brother Matt, would you ask place on offering? Amen.
Give me a minute, I gotta move furniture here.
Now, if y'all ain't no hurry. There's one good thing about these things. It taught me to slow down. Lord has taught me a lot of patience with these things. Get started out with a little testimony. Dave's message this morning. I've played this guitar on and off for years, and I got to the point where I was doing the songs that I wanted to do, and not listening to the Lord what He wanted me to do. And I got where when I'd sing, I'd cry so hard that I couldn't get through the song. And I prayed the Lord to, Lord, take them tears away from me. Man, I can't get this stuff done. And He did. Worst prayer I ever made in my life. When He took that will of the emotion, the love through the tears, that took away my, it's hard to say, He quit giving me songs. And see, that's when, I quit playing for a long time. And when I started getting back to this, I always had this problem with my hands. He gave me my hands back. He gave me them hands back for a reason.
Man.
And I got playing at the house. My tears came back.
Amen.
And He started giving me songs again. And I learned a valuable lesson. Do what the Lord tells you to do.
Man.
He can take it away from you. And it is a struggle to get it back. It was for me. But He gave it back to me. And I praise His name for letting me have it back. And that's why I tell y'all, if I get up there and I start crying, so be it. He gives me that.
Amen.
And He gives me these songs. This one here, I had no clue. About 1 o'clock today. And it kept running over and over and over in my head. Yep, that's it. I couldn't get it out of my head. But I don't worry. I used to worry about what I was going to sing. And I don't worry about it no more. He gives it to me every time. And I'm blessed. Now, how I sing it's another problem, but we won't get into that. Life is easy when you're up on the mountain and you've got peace of mind like you've never known. But things change when you're down in the valley. Don't lose faith, for you're never alone. For the God on the mountain is still God in the valley. Things go wrong, He'll make it right.
Amen.
And the God of the good times is still God in the bad times, God of the day, is still God in the night. Talk of faith when you're up on the mountain. Talk comes easy when life's at its best. Now it's down in the valley of trials and temptations. That's where you'll faith really put to the test. For the God on the mountain is still God in the valley. Things go wrong, you'll make them right. And the God of the good times is still God in the bad times. God of the day is still God in the night. God of the day is still God in the night.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you for sharing that with us tonight. If you have your Bibles, we're going to start out in Exodus. I appreciate that, and I tell you, when I first came here, I didn't know he could sing, and I'm sure glad that he let the Lord use that. I thoroughly, one of the highlights is waiting until Sunday night. How about I just get him to do it on Sunday morning? It's wait until Sunday night when we get to hear him. And he's been a blessing to me for sure. You know, when you think about, so we talked this morning about being obedient and about who God is, and you know, why would you ever want to tell God no? And you think about, the respect we give to people on this earth, and of course God's way past that. And it's such a simple thing, right? Just do what he tells you tomorrow. But even though we know that's still a struggle, and it shouldn't be. I mean, because of who he is, it ought to be. I mean, that ought to be one of the easiest things we ever do, is just do what he tells us to do, right? Along with that, when we look at the obedience, you think about, those of us that, if you had kids or grandkids, or even a niece and nephew, watch them go through. Have you ever seen a young lady maybe date somebody that they shouldn't date? And you know that hanging around that boy is causing am I on, Jamie? Okay. That is causing, you can tell that their attitude has changed. It doesn't change right away, but the longer they spend time with that person, you can tell that that's not a healthy thing for them to do, because they're changing in the way they do things. They're not as engaged with the family. Maybe they're not as engaged with the church. They're keeping to themselves. They're not as happy as they used to be. And then you then turn around and you talk to them and you say, I am worried about that influence that they're having on you. And immediately when you mention that, they go into the defense mode saying, well, I don't, and they try to back that up and say, well, I don't think anything's changed, and they begin to backpedal. But you saw something in their life that was changing because of an influence of another person. You can have it in reverse where if a boy is dating somebody that maybe they shouldn't date, you can see it just with a friend. When a young person starts hanging out with somebody that maybe doesn't have the same morals or the same goals, or maybe their family church isn't important to them, and they start doing things together, and it starts out, well, I'm just going to go over here on a Friday night, and then it starts building and building and building. It starts eroding into more things that actually mean something. They're less and less involved. Maybe even at school they're not doing as good as they used to do. They're never home. They don't want to be home. And then you go into the same thing and you say, hey, wait a minute, something's happened here. This is a bad influence. When you think about what influence is, let me read this to you. It's the capacity to have an effect on the character and development or behavior of someone or something. It's the capacity to have an effect on the character, the development, or behavior of someone or something. You can hang around somebody and be influenced by them, and if their influence isn't a godly influence, and you respect that person, and you like that person, and the more time that you spend with them, maybe it's something you wouldn't do immediately, but it's a gradual effect. The more time that you spend, the more time you think, well, maybe this isn't really all that bad. Maybe people are saying I shouldn't do this, but I really don't see it as being bad anymore, and then that influence begins to build, and pretty soon you're doing things that you wouldn't normally do had it not been for that influence, right? Well, it can happen by befriending somebody at work, that maybe their main goal in life isn't put the Lord first on Sunday. It could be a golfing event once. It can be, this came up on this particular day, and then that begins to build and build and build. It can be not even a person, it can be a thing that begins to influence you, and it actually has the power to change our behavior as we begin to think of that person as more of a positive thing, and we begin to, in time, act like they're acting, right? So we call that a bad influence. But with that said, you can also be a good influence. And I just want to look at tonight the power of influence. Let's look at Exodus chapter 3, and we'll get going. Father, thank you for loving us. Thank you for caring about us. Lord, I pray as we look at this, we would just look at our own life. And Lord, just to make sure, Father, that we're being influenced in the right direction. And not only that, Lord, that we're being a good influence to the people around us. And Father, if there's anybody that ought to have the ability to imprint on our character and who we are, it ought to be you. Lord, the greatest influence in our life ought to be you. And Lord, I pray you'd help us to be able to see that and work on that tonight. Father, thank you for forgiving us, and thank you for being kind to us. I pray you'd work in your word tonight. We ask this in your precious name. Just like obedience, we would say that God is absolutely, he should be the one that should influence us, right? And you ought to be able to look at your life and see the influence of God in your life. You ought to be able to look and see and tell that person has been in the company of God and the Spirit of God, and because of that, there are some things that you can point to that person's life and say what they're doing, who they are, is a direct result of influence in their life, and a godly influence. In this story here, you guys know it. It's the burning bush. God has given Moses his marching orders. Now, this is not something Moses is comfortable with. This isn't something that Moses wants to do. This is something that Moses is apprehensive about. When we're going to jump in the middle of it to verse 11, it says this in chapter 3, verse 11, and Moses said unto God, well, let's go to verse 10. Come now, therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. From verse 1 to 10, it just builds up on that. Now he's telling Moses what he wants out of him. Come now, therefore, and I will send thee unto Pharaoh, that thou mayest bring forth my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. And Moses said unto God, who am I that I should go unto Pharaoh, that I should bring forth the children of Israel out of Egypt? At this point, he doesn't want anything to do with this. Now, no doubt he has to know where his roots came from. No doubt he had to know I'm sure he didn't find out about, by the way, who wrote the first 5 books of the Bible? Moses. I don't think Moses found out about the ark and the bulrushes while he was writing it, right? I am sure somebody had passed on what happened and what his mom did. I am sure he knew of his past. I'm sure he knew he had a godly mother who set out and did something that just doesn't make any sense. What would cause her to put her child into that little ark, push it out in the river and let it float down there so Pharaoh's wife could find it. See, she was under a power of influence just to be able to do that. I mean, all the worry that's in a mom's mind, all the things that you would have to override. You know, could you imagine trying to verbally talk Moses' mother into doing that? I would say that no woman in here would be comfortable if I had. What you would say is, here's that crazy guy that used to live in Africa with another crazy harebrained idea that doesn't make any sense in the world to me. Now he wants me to put my baby in this little ark and float it out in the water and trust God, right? You know, you would think, how crazy would that be? What kind of compelling argument would you have to have on the other end to talk somebody into doing that with confidence? Now that's influence. And his mom, under great influence of God Almighty, had incredible peace to be able to put that little baby and know that it was going to be okay and let it go into the very hands of the people that were killing the babies to begin with. And then God stepped down in there. She got to actually raise her own child and got paid to do so. Now, that's not God. That is just an incredible story. Well, Moses knew that. So now he's standing there, and God wants him to do something, and he is not a willing participant. Okay? And so now what's happening? You know, at this point, God is going to try to influence his decision. If he leaves it right then, Moses isn't doing it. But aren't you glad that God doesn't leave us to our own devices? Aren't you glad the Lord helps us? Okay? And what he's doing is he's going to try to talk him into doing this. But he's going to do it through the power of influence. And this is what he says to him. Moses says, hey, you know what? I'm not interested in that. Verse 12, and he said, certainly I will be with thee. Immediately, he answers the doubt. He's saying, Moses, do you honestly think I'm just going to send you out there? I mean, you're talking, think about it. You're talking to a bush that's burning. You're having a conversation with a bush that's on fire with the voice telling you that he's God. He's already asked you to take off his shoes, and he's still not getting it. And Moses says, man, who am I? I can't do that. And then the voice says to him out of the bush, he says, well, certainly you know I'm going to go with you. I mean, that ought to be it right then, right? I mean, you ought to be able to say, okay, hey, that's all I needed. You're coming with me. Let's go. Okay? And he said, certainly I will be with thee, and this shall be a token unto thee that I have sent thee when thou hast brought forth the people out of Egypt. Ye shall serve God upon this mountain. And Moses said unto God, behold, when I come unto the children of Israel, and shall say unto them, the God of your fathers has sent me unto you, and they shall say unto me, what is his name, and what shall I say unto them? And God said unto Moses, I am that I am. And he said, thus shalt thou say unto the children of Israel, I am hath sent me unto you. And you can go through this whole story, and you know how it ends. Eventually, he ends up sending Aaron with him. But at the end of the day, Moses goes on the journey. He actually ends up in front of Pharaoh. And he's actually, now, can you just imagine the first time he took that rod and he threw it on the ground and the thing turned into a snake? Or the funniest one to me is when he put his hand into his shirt, God said, okay, you know what he was doing with each one of those miracles? He was influencing. He said, put your hand inside your shirt. And when he did that, do you think he knew what was going to happen next? He's going to pull out, because he wouldn't put it in there. Now, but he said, put it in there, and he put his hand in there, and he pulled out, and it was leprosy. Do you think he just went and said, look at that? No, he'd do what you and I did. He'd pull it out and go, ah! You know, I mean, what are you doing? You know what he was doing with each one of those events? He was influencing Moses. He was spending time with Moses, and what he was doing behind the scenes is he was manipulating his character. He was manipulating his person and giving him confidence. And what you see when the finished product of Moses standing in front of Egypt is that he could say he was under the influence of God Almighty. Is that not incredible? by simply spending time with God in a way. I don't know how long this took, but it was a lifetime up to this point walking with God. And on that day, God got to influence his creation. God talked him into going there and telling Pharaoh, let my people go. There he is. He's got, plain clothes on. He's living out in the wilderness. He's not fancy like he used to be in in Egypt. He walks up there with a staff in his hand. He smells like sheep. And here's this, I always think in my mind about Charleston Heston and what he looks like Moses, and that's what's embedded in my mind. He's standing there and he says, God said, let my people go. Who does that? A man under the influence of God, and it's changing his behavior. It's changing what he would do, and now the confidence that is in the creator of the universe is now inside of Moses, and that's why he was able to do what he did. And from that day forward, you never look at Moses being afraid. In fact, he sent Aaron to do the talking, but after he got going, he didn't need Aaron anymore. He was a mile a minute with all kinds of suggestions but who talked him into doing that? It was the influence of God. Now we can take that a little bit further. All right, how do you get a little boy, a young man? Let's say he was 15, 16 years old, even 19 years old. How do you get a young man being willing to walk out on a battlefield when nobody else wants to do it? How do you talk somebody into picking up 5 rocks, sticking it in your pocket, and launching a rock at a 10-foot giant? You know what had to happen? He had to be under the influence of somebody in order to even think that was going to be a good idea. You don't do that on your own. Okay? Just may I tell you, you don't destroy your life on your own either. You don't go down the wrong path on your own either. All of us in this room that have made mistakes in our life, whether they were when we're younger or when we're older, you're going to trace it back to some kind of influence. An influence that you allowed to be comfortable in your life, to gain a spot of respect, and then you began to listen to that influence. You begin to give that influence some time in your life. And it's a gradual thing. It's not something that you're super comfortable about. But pretty soon, Christians that used to be faithful aren't faithful anymore. And you know what you'll find at the end of that journey? You'll find an influence. Whether it's somebody else that was disgruntled with the church that then rubs off on somebody. Do you know what I found when somebody leaves the church? They don't normally do it by themselves. You know what normally happens? What they normally do is they get upset. And then they talk. And then when that talk is allowed, it continues. And over time, it's never something that's by itself. And then when we listen to things, and when you entertain that, and that gets comfortable, and then oftentimes it's one-sided, and then pretty soon, then that disgruntledness starts to build, and then they get that way. And then pretty soon, then that shows up in their attendance, and then off the charts they go, and then they don't come anymore. Nobody knows what happened to them. But I promise you, anytime that you'll see something like that, you're going to find that there is an influence behind that behavior, because we don't act alone. May I tell you something? When you're on fire for the Lord and you're doing what you're supposed to do you know that you will oftentimes take somebody with you with that? You'll influence other people, okay? And then when you're the other direction, you very seldom ever go by yourself. You always end up taking somebody else with you. And I can say this in the time of going through COVID. Probably the highlight, and I mean this with all my heart, probably the highlight of coming here during some of those times is we had some older folks that just wouldn't quit. And no matter what, I mean, they did their very best to be here. And when I walk in here and I see that encouraged me. That influenced me. That was something that picked me up. When it's kind of a little discouraging when your Sunday morning service is well below your actual Sunday school service, and you see the numbers. I felt like just taking them down, not even looking at them. maybe you don't even realize that you influenced me, but you did, because we never do anything like that by ourselves, right? I mean, for the number of stories that you find in the Bible where God influenced somebody, David, to go up against the giant. But when you remember the spies, when they went to go spy out the land, they came back, and that group of people, minus 2 of them, influenced the whole entire nation simply by their attitude and their demeanor. How does a small number like that turn around 1 million people? Can you imagine? 1 million people, they had a decision who they're going to listen to, and they listened to the ones with the bad report, and just a handful of people turned around a whole entire nation. They spent 40 years in the wilderness because of an influence for somebody in the wrong direction. They weren't encouraging them in the Lord. They were complaining, and they were griping, and then that spread, and all of a sudden doubt began to spread. And then you see, boy, it caught on here, and it caught on here, and the whole entire group of people, minus just a handful of Caleb and Joshua were it that said, hey, we can go do this. The whole group of them fell under the influence of a small amount of people and ended up spending 40 years in the wilderness because of the influence. Now in our life, when you think about influence, I was going to ask Brother Sean, you got your phone with you? All right, so how many hours you got? What, there's 7 days in a week. Take 7 times 24. I'm not good enough to do it in my mind. The other day we were in Sunday school, and we were talking about how big heaven was. And Jordan had it in his Bible where they had broke it out to a measurement that we could understand. And he said that it ended up being, I forget, like heaven would be from the East Coast all the way to the Midwest is how wide that city would be. And because it did the math. Well, when you do that, when he was talking about it, it made it really clear. But I just want to really quick show, okay, so how many hours? 168, is that right? Let's see. So you got 24 hours in a day times 7 days. 168 hours, is that correct? Okay. So how many of those hours do you think actually belong to the Lord? So let's do this. Are you comfortable with saying that an average Christian is good for 1 hour of devotion and prayer time? Am I being too heavy, or am I being too light on that? Do you think an hour is okay? Or do you think it should be a little bit more? How many vote an hour? How many don't care? All right, put an hour down there. All right, so you got, remember that number, 168? Okay, so if you give 1 hour devotions, average Christian, I'm going to give you an hour a day to pray and read your Bible. Okay, that's 7 hours. Now we're gonna make you a Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night Christian. Okay, so you're going to go to all 3 services. Okay, on Wednesday that's an hour, so add another hour to that. Okay, on Sunday, because of the television thing, I have to be done at 12. So you got an hour for Sunday school, and you got an hour for morning service. That's 2 hours, and then you give Sunday night. That's 3. So how many total hours? 11 hours. Now, am I missing any other place in your life that you can get influence from God? Now, we can throw in Christian music. If you want to add in a little bit of that into that, you can throw in 5 hours into that if you want. You can add a little bit of, let's go and throw in 5 hours on top of that for if you're watching sermons on TV or listening to Christian music. So how many hours you got? 16 hours out of 168 hours is the average influence that we allow God to have directly in our life. And then we wonder why sometimes it's a struggle. Because influence has to do with time spent with the influencer. And you can't get it any other way. That's the reason why fellowship outside of the church is important. That's the reason why being involved in ministry is important, because we need every hour on top of that you can possibly get, because on a good day, if you hit every one of them perfect and you actually read your Bible and you pray for an hour, you only have 16 hours. Now, if you take the amount of time that's with a television, or the amount of time when the kid's around the friends. When you start adding all of that that's out in the world, the influence on that side is much greater than the influence on this side. And that's the problem. We're being out-influenced. But there is if you recognize the power of influence, and you're going to want to get around the person that can influence you the most, and that's the Lord. And you cannot get it any other way but being around that person. Then his thoughts and his ideas begin to become your thoughts and your ideas, and then they begin, just like you can see somebody's in a bad attitude because they've been hanging around a wrong person, or their church attendance has dropped because of negative influence, or whatever the case it may be. You can see just the opposite when a person is in the Bible like they need to be in the Bible, when a person is involved in church and they've got ministries and things. When a person's doing that, you can tell that. All right, you can feel it. You know yourself when your walk with the Lord is sweet because of the time spent around him, and you can't get it any other way. There are no shortcuts with influence. Okay, you've got to be able to be around that. I did not shoot my first deer till I was 32 years old. Do you know why? First off, in Florida, they don't have very many of them, and you're not allowed to do it at the zoo. All right. Second, my father wasn't allowed to have a gun, so that was out. Nobody ever took me hunting. Well, I go to North Carolina, which is about as country as this place, and I started hanging out with guys that hunted. And then they would ask me to come over, and they would show me their guns, and they would talk about doing this, and they would say, "Hey, would you want to go?" They wouldn't give me a gun at first. I just went out there with them, right? And then Bertie, they quit laughing. And then I missed an awful lot. I did an awful lot of that, and then all of a sudden that influence became a point in my life. This year, my two boys shot deer with a black powder because of an influence that I had. But think about that. Are we influencing our kids to pray? Are we influencing our kids to trust God? Are we influencing our kids to be forgiving, to love our enemies? Is it evident in our behavior that we have spent time with God, and people hang around us and say, "Wait a minute, there's something different about that person," and then that person then ends up influencing you? I mean, the reason why I feel the way I do about missions is I didn't get it accidentally. I mean, I watched older missionaries walk in there that were weathered and beaten, and it had these incredible prayer lives. That they told me about these stories about praying and opening up the mailbox, and there'd be a check for $100, and they had no food. And I'd hear those stories, and it influenced me, and I thought, man, what I want to know that kind of God. And it began a journey that hadn't stopped, but I didn't get there on my own. Influenced me for the King James Bible. I don't have a problem with that. I will use that the rest of my life. Do you know? Because there was some godly men in my life that influenced me and taught me about that book. It's already been imprinted on me, and my desire is, hey, we don't need to join a movement where you start changing things. There's nothing wrong with that one, but the reason why I believed that was because somebody influenced me. The reason being that I really believe in discipleship, I believe during the week, one-on-one, Christian spending time with Christian, is because somebody influenced me in that direction and showed me the value of that. And then I turned around and I watched people grow, and I watch people disciple and get involved in church, and now they're in the ministry, and that influenced me, and I can go on a huge list of that. But you don't get that on your own. You've got to get some time around God and his people and allow him to do that, and then you and I can then turn around and influence other people. The things that I would ever do as a pastor is because I've seen it done before, but I didn't come up with it. It's because godly men sat down with me and they influenced me. And then somebody influenced them and somebody influenced them. You're either going to do one thing or the other. It's either going to be a bad one or a good one. And I look in the Bible and I think, what an incredible story. God influenced him to walk up to Pharaoh and do that. He influenced David to take a stone and fling it at a giant. You know, I mean, you can go on those stories, but then you can also look at the negative influence that are all over the Bible where people were on the right. Look about Balaam. One king said, can you curse Israel? No, can't do that. You know what, Greg? He kept talking to him. Instead of hanging up the phone, taking him out of your don't call list, saying, you delete this, I'm not talking anymore, he kept picking up the phone. And the guy would say, boy, I really need you to curse Israel. And he said, I can't do that. But then he found out the guy's a nice guy. He was a good king. Every time he went there, he was buying them dinner and whatever. And the longer and longer, they began to develop a relationship to somebody who hated Israel. And now it became more difficult for Balaam to just flat out tell him, no, I'm not going to do that. They began to get comfortable with that situation, and now that king began to influence him. And even though God told him, and you think the donkey incident would have been it, right? I mean, you think after something's talking to you that you would be done with that, right? And saying, hey, I can't do this anymore. Do you know what that king got him to do? Because there was now a friendship that should have never been. He said, look, I can't curse them, but I'll tell you another way. If you get their men to marry your daughters, then your daughters will corrupt those men, and eventually God will have to chastise them. That's what he told him. Do you know why he did that? He left an influence in his life that shouldn't be there. You know, you might think in the innocence of these things, really, what is one time with a friend? What is a TV show? What is actually just one? It's not one. It's built on the next one. It's built on the next one. It's built on the next one. It's built on relationships and comfortableness. And you know, I mentioned the other week. You know, the problem is our young people can run into somebody that's an unbeliever, and they be nicer. They be nicer to them than somebody that's saved. And you know how many times I've heard people say that? And they'll say, yeah, but they're nice people. You know, but you told me, you know, and then you listen to the defense. Well, they don't do this. Well, they're not on their third marriage, or they're not this, or they're not that. Well, they're not even saved, but what they're doing now is they've gotten comfortable listening to that. That's the reason why it is a big deal to guard everybody around you and everything you do and everything you allow into your life, because without even thinking about it, things that you would have never agreed with, you might find yourself agreeing with simply through the power of influence in our mind. But if that same time is spent with Jesus, you know, remember those two that were walking with Jesus, and they spent that whole afternoon with him, and they asked him to sit down and eat, and at the end of the day, he left. And they realized it was Jesus, and all of a sudden they stopped, and they said, did not our hearts burn within us? Do you know, when you ran into somebody that spent time with Jesus, you could tell it. Because he influenced them. You know what he told them? Peter, how many times I got to forgive him? Can you imagine that conversation one day? He sat down and never gave any names. Well, I have this friend, you know. He said, Jesus, how many times should I forgive, you know, somebody that's done something to me? You know what Jesus did today? He influenced Peter. He said, by the way, Peter, you're going to want me to practice this later on. You know how many times you forgive him? 70 times 7. You know what he was doing? He was influencing him. In the hope that later on Peter would be like him. That he would imprint on his character, that he would imprint on who he was every day, making Peter more like him. But guys, if we don't spend time with him, we don't get around him, 16 hours out of 168, I think that, think about, he's God. You're going to live with him forever. We talk to people we don't even like sometimes more than we talk to God. We have more quality time with other things out there that didn't die for us on the cross. But what would happen if we really began to value that and say, my goal this week is I want to show up at Sunday and I want somebody to recognize the fact that I've been influenced. That my behavior, my mind, my thinking, I mean, if you let God influence you this week, you're going to stay away from sin a whole lot easier, because it's hard to do it when you're in direct contact with Him. If you're around Him and you're in the Word and you're meditating on Him, do you know we all have free time inside of this, whether you're driving in a car or whatever? Do you know there's nothing stopping you from releasing your mind from this depressing world and sticking it up on another level with God and just hanging out with Him? Do that anytime you want with the God of the universe, and you cannot do that and come back grumpy, self-centered, selfish, angry, hurtful. He's going to rub off on you, and I need that influence in my life. And so, what if the goal this week was to do that? Let me just show you. I'll just read a couple of these, and then we got in. I'll just read you a couple. Let me read you some in Psalms chapter 27. I'll hit these really quick. Psalms chapter 27 and verse 8. Psalms chapter 27 and verse 8. When thou saidst, seek ye my face, my heart said unto thee, thy face, Lord, will I seek. I want you to, now if you've got time to go back and read all of this, it's a very, and we can just read a little bit at the beginning. The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom shall I fear? Verse 2, when the wicked, even mine enemies and my foes came upon me to eat up my flesh, they stumbled and fell. Though a host should encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war should rise against me, in this will I be confident. One thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell. Listen to this. One thing I have desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, and behold the beauty of the Lord, and to inquire in His temple. And then, I mean, what a wonderful way he just put that. And then he says this, when thou saidst, seek ye my face, my heart said unto thee, thy face, Lord, will I seek. Can we say that about our own walk with the Lord? When God says, hey, would you seek me? You know what he's saying? Would you allow me the opportunity to influence you? Right? I can't, you know, and it says here, my heart, when thou saidst, seek ye my face, my heart said unto thee, thy face, Lord, will I seek. I have tried effortlessly to try to talk somebody into not being angry. I've wasted lots of times, I think, counseling marriages and saying, please don't give up. Please give it another try. I have had conversation after conversation after conversation with young people that weren't living right and begging them, please, please come back to the Lord. And it was unsuccessful in changing that direction. But may I tell you something? I'm just a person. But I wonder if you'd let God talk you out of something. I mean, I might not be able to do it, but I wonder if you'd let God talk you out of it. I wonder if you'd take your opinions and let God change them. I wonder if you'd take your heart and just let God heal it. I wonder whatever's going on in your mind, that I might not be able to change that thought, and you say, I'll never, or it's not going to, or I'm not going to do that, or whatever. You can draw that from here to the moon, and I might not be able to get you to think anything different about it, but I wonder if you let God help you think something different about it. I wonder if you'd let His, think about that. He said, seek my face, and David says, thy face, Lord, will I seek. Wow. And you wonder why, you read that whole, and you wonder why God said this about David. He's a man after my own heart. Because He let Him influence him. Now, wasn't perfect. But you can say this of David, that David had been around the Lord, no question. It was, and you can tell it in his attitude. It just over and over again in the Psalms, he's just pouring that out. So, you know, the power of influence is huge. The world has a chance to influence us way more than we give God. That's the reason why, you know, if you hear me talk, listen, I've been in the ministry 30 years. I've read my Bible through countless times. You know, I've led people to the Lord. And you know what? I found out, Brother Lord, I still sin. And if I could figure out how to fix that, with all of that effort, I still do things I don't want to do. All right, but before you judge me, here's what I come to the conclusion. That's with me trying. I'd hate to see what it was like if I didn't. Right? I mean, that's with me trying the best that's with me not missing church. That's with me staying in the Bible. I mean, that's what you get because you're broken, right? I mean, we need every chance we can to be around God and His Word. We need that influence. And if we let Him influence us, then that changes everything else. And what if next Sunday we come back to church and what we're around we're around people that act like Christ? Wow, what a good service that would be. Everybody, you get pulled over. I remember one time I was driving, and you guys know I'm scatterbrained. I was making a visit. It was late, and I was coming home, and they gave me a Diet Coke to drink on the way home. Well, I put it in between my legs, and I spilt it, and it was cold, and I was trying to clean it, and I crossed that center line, right? And guess what? Woo, 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 woo. He pulled me over and starts all these questions. Well, unfortunately, the Diet Coke can looks like a Coors can. So that was the first thing. We had to go through that, and I had to prove to him it was a Diet Coke. And then he was asking all these questions, and I said, and he wanted me to get out and do the little thing here, because I crossed the center line, and I said, buddy, you're barking up a dry well today. I said, I just got out of church, and I'm as sober as a church mouse, But sometimes people get pulled over for, say they've been under the influence of the alcohol, and you can see it. They're like this. And in Africa, it's hilarious. I mean, it's not funny. But, you can walk down. Greg and Chris have seen it. Sean, in the bush, somebody that's drunk, they'll be walking down the dirt. I've seen it with a baby on their back, and they're like this. They're like, woo, out of it, And one of them, Maggie and I found them. They were laying in the middle of the street. I stopped, and I got one of the Nationals, and I went out there. I thought he was dead. So I gave him a little kick, and he sat up, and he looked right at me. He said, Buana, what are you doing in my bedroom? And I'm like, we're not in your bedroom. I said, you're in the road. I said, you're in the middle of the road. He says, sorry, I'm intoxicated. I'm like, really? And he was definitely visibly under the influence of alcohol. Wouldn't that be great if tomorrow somebody could say, Dave Barnhouse is visibly under the influence of God? That'd be a good goal to strive, as he's operating under the influence of God. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. I just pray that you would help us value that, and Lord, guard that against the world and its influence. Lord, thank you for a story where, Lord, you use that influence to change a man's opinion of what he could or could not do. And we got a great story from the Bible about that. Lord, I pray that we would endeavor to work on spending time with you and around your people to give you a chance to influence our lives, not just in church, but outside of church. And that you would use us to reach other people. Father, just thank you for loving us. We ask this in your precious name. Amen. We got two things.